Hello, this is Julius from Basic Financials. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about IR35. It's quite a complex and big and all-encompassing topic, but I'll try and just do a little bit of an overview of what it's all about. Now, IR35, that's Inland Revenue 35, it's just a regulation that came out. I'll go back to the beginning of how it started. What tended to happen was people who employed people in certain types of industries, construction industry is a typical one, but also IT contractors is another one. The employers decided, it would be better if we treated these people as if they were self-employed, because then the employers don't have to pay employers national insurance, or the employees didn't have to pay employees national insurance. They were treated as self-employed. They still had to pay national insurance, but it's slightly better. But the main thing was employers' national insurance, and also it took them out of employment rights. And there were various other industries as well. I think lorry drivers were a similar sort of thing happened with them. But basically, it's where an employer employed people, and the employer decided, actually, we're going to treat these people as not employees but self-employed. And then they said to everybody, okay, you've got to set up as self-employed, and we'll pay you on that basis. And then that got around the national insurance. So that was the reason behind that. Now, obviously, after a time, HMRC, or Inland Revenue at the time, thought, this isn't very good, is it? So what they said then was, we're going to, they said that if we're going to look more closely at the relationship, and if the relationship is actually one of employer-employee, then you as the employer will become liable for the Class 1 national insurance contributions and tax that should have been paid. And we'll treat whatever you've paid them, the individual net, we'll treat them as their net pay and gross it up and charge you the tax and national insurance that you should have paid as if they were employee. And that's obviously quite a big issue for the employer, and made it quite a big risk issue as well, because it was a bit grey sometimes. So what then happened is they tried to make sure things were set up with contracts that made it look like that they were not employees. There are various things that you can do to try and get around it. But what made it even safer was if the individuals, rather than being self-employed, the individuals set up their own companies and then became employees of their own companies. That meant that there's no way that the employer could be regarded as employing the employee, because they were actually contracting to a company. So these companies, loads of people set up companies, and instead of being self-employed, they became directors, shareholders, and employees of their own companies. That protected the employer again. After a while, HMRC decided, no, this isn't very good, is it? Another thing that's got round the regulations. So that's when they introduced IR35. And IR35 basically said, if the relationship between the worker and the employer is actually one of employer-employee, and tax and national insurance would be due, or we would deem it to be due, but for the existence of this company in between, then the company in between will have to pay the person who set up the company a salary on the income that they earned that should have been under IR35. So in other words, it said that, okay, you've set up this company in between, this company is going to be responsible for the tax and national insurance on anything that gets paid out to the individual. So that stopped the individuals from paying a small salary, the rest out in dividends, and they paid much less tax than they would have done as an employee. So it was basically said, well, if you've taken money out of the company, In fact, even if you haven't taken money out of the company, if you get income from the company, then IR35 will apply, and you have to deduct tax and national insurance and pay it over to HMRC. So that's what IR35 was set up for. Now, it's quite complicated legislation. The main problem was that nobody actually, well, not nobody, but generally, people either tried to get around it by setting up these legal contracts that said that you could substitute somebody else in, you were using your own equipment, you directed your own work, but really, on the whole, it was probably just to get around the rules. So they then thought, well, we don't need to do IR35. So a lot of people just didn't know about it, or decided, oh, well, no, we're not going to do this anyway. And then other people tried to get around it and didn't do it for that reason. And there's so many of these situations that HMRC are basically unable to keep. They can't look at them all. So more recently, HMRC trialled it starting in the public sector. So where, for example, NHS might employ IT contractors. That's the public sector. So they said, okay, well, no, we're going to make the people aren't doing the IR35, so therefore we're going to make the payer, i.e. the NHS Trust, we're going to make you responsible if IR35 should apply. So what happened there is then the NHS Trust would either try and really tighten up their contracts to make it look like IR35 doesn't apply, and if they couldn't do that, then they would have to deduct tax and national insurance, or they would start employing the individual. And this also happened, well, not so much in the construction industry yet, but so started in the public sector. And then from the 6th of April next year, it's also going to apply, from the 6th of April, from 6th of April next year, so 2021. It was going to be 2020, but it's got delayed, so it's now 2021. They are going to make the employer responsible, even in the private sector. So, an example in the construction industry, where this has been going on, there's a whole load of people who are now not having their own companies. They're either becoming employed or the arrangements are changing. So that's a brief example. Well, it's not brief, but that sort of gives a bit of a description of what IR35 is all about. And now the important change at the moment is that they're making the person paying the wages, paying the worker, is now going to be responsible for paying the tax and national insurance if IR35 would apply, regardless of whether there's a company stuck in between. And there's a chain effect. So actually, if you've got some organisation, some set up where you've got you've got the worker, and then you've got an umbrella company, somebody else, and then you've got the final worker. There'll be a chain of responsibility. So if somebody doesn't end up paying, it'll go to the next one. So it's changed the setup quite a bit, and you're probably going to find that a lot of companies are going to be wound up, so that to factor in this change. I'm not sure if I can really go any further at the moment, but that, if you're wondering what IR35 is and what the changes are, that's gives you a bit of a description. Anyway, I hope that helps a bit. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the box below or comments. And if you could like and subscribe as usual, and I'll see you again for another video sometime soon. Thanks for listening.